Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today on a video blog instead of trying to write something out, which apparently I have a lot of problem with, and at least getting it published in a reasonably decent amount of time. Let's try this video stuff and just kind of, quote unquote, make it up as I go. And of course, now you have to look at me, so there's that too. Today's topic is my favorite Skinner book. And spoilers, it is not Verbal Behavior. Okay, it is in fact this book, Walden 2. Okay, and I want to make the case for you that it might just be Skinner's most important work. Published in 1948, it predates Science and Human Behavior, and from 1953, Verbal Behavior from 1957. Definitely predates Freedom and Dignity in 73. The only book that Skinner published before this was Behavior of Organisms back in like 38. But it's unique in that it's not an academic book. Okay, it's actually a novel, right? And as you know, Skinner wanted to be a writer before he found psychology and decided to pursue that. And this is, I think, a product of that desire to be a writer. But what's unique about this and what makes it to me very valuable is that it really lays out pretty well his behavior of science before the academic books come out. Okay, in this book, he is going through in pretty good detail what behavior science is about, using the novel as the format. Okay, so in here, the main protagonist, T.E. Frazier, has created a utopian society based on behavioral principles, right? And the two other main characters, Drs. Castle and Burris, are visiting him at his request and peppering him with questions as he goes through and talks to them about the entire community. And so they're just going back and forth. And Frazier is having to justify the behavioral principles that they're using. And he's using terminology like behavioral engineering. And he's describing things like contingency management. He's describing things like reinforcement in non-behavioral terminology. He's using real world ways to describe it, but that's what's going on. And the fact that, Frazier is describing these things and then being questioned and having to justify that is Skinner's way of really working through the details of what becomes the science of behavior. Okay. Now, the novel aspect of this, and I use that term in a couple of different ways, is that there's a story here. There's an actual story that weaves its way through the whole book. Okay. It starts out with a couple of GIs that had just come out of World War II, who were a little disillusioned with what the society had become. Okay, they wanted something different, and they had read about Frazier while they were in overseas in the Philippines, and were coming to Burris to maybe find out some more information. And luck has it, they all get invited to Walden 2 for a visit. Okay, and so there are some struggles there with the GIs and their girlfriends. There's, a little bit of romance, a little bit of success, a little bit of failure along through, and personal growth from Burris from the beginning to the end. So there's a definite story there. It's not dry academic stuff, but the story adds to the readability, and you get a lot of behavioral information through this book. Okay, and that's why I think it's very important. Now, if you've read things like Verbal Behavior, and most everybody who's a BCBA has at one time or another read Verbal Behavior for a class, knows that it is very dense and difficult to read. Okay, you often have to read it a couple of times just to get through the passage. Not so with Walden 2. Okay, because it's a novel, it reads very easily, and you get those things. Another thing I like about it is that it really sets the stage for OBM, okay? Because there is no mention whatsoever in this book of autism or developmental disabilities. Okay. The principles that Fraser is using on his society are universal. He's talking about everyday people who are using these principles to manage their behavior, to manage the behavior of others, and improve society, which was the ultimate aim, right? So that I think is very fascinating in that, as a field, we've kind of jumped on the autism bandwagon, the developmental disabilities bandwagon. But you can see from this writing, from this book, that Skinner intended it to be for everything. It's universal, okay? And that's one of the things I like about it. And I think it's a good starting point for people who might want to get into the field to read this book and not have that specific focus of autism and developmental disabilities. They can see that this works universally before they even get into the field. And then once they can transition into those specific narrow job skills, job market kind of things, okay? So that's another thing I like about this book and why it's still very important. So that's what I consider my favorite book. I hope that you take up reading it. If you do, I also suggest that you hit the B.F. Skinner Foundation website at bfskinner.org. In their store, I think it's called, might be books, but I think it's called store, they have an audiobook that you should definitely get. It is the book, the audiobook of Walden 2, read by the man himself, okay? You will be listening to B.F. Skinner read his book word for word in an amazing manner. He gives it inflection. He reads it like a conversation. When there are conversations in the book, it's amazing, okay? I have listened to that so many times, I'm surprised the files still load for me, okay? It's great. But it is literally word for word in the book. You can go through and read it as he's reading it as well. But for your long car drives between clients or whatever, or going to a conference or whatever, download it, listen to it. It's amazing. So that's my favorite book. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you pick it up.